Well, thank you, Anna. Welcome, everyone. This is the Biopharma Research Council webinar on Flexible Biomanufacturing Now, Data to Decisions. The Biopharma Research Council is an association for scientists throughout all the many different silos of biomedical research. So we talk about industry, academia, nonprofit, government, and supplier labs, and the folks who love them. But we also are looking across different disease states, all different parts of the development process, and so on. So we feel that a great contribution that we can make to the community is to help people understand each other's language and perspectives in order to collaborate better, which is really what everyone needs to do in today's world. I'm going to just share with you a few of our upcoming programs. We're doing a short course in the microbiome as a webinar series throughout April and into May that will then include it will also include a one-day program at the NIH, which will happen sometime this summer. In May, we're doing a one-day program in Boston on CRISPR-Cas and its relationship and work in stem cell research, which should be very exciting. We'll be hosted by Merck, and it'll be open to all different companies and academics and so on. Should be a terrific program. And then in July, we're scheduling a program, a one-day program on cybersecurity for pharma and medical devices. I'm going to launch a very short poll here and ask you all to identify yourselves on this one question. So please click in the best answer for you. Great. So what I can see here is that about 75% say it's new to be looking at data this way, which is fantastic. And about 25% are saying you're looking for your next step. So I'm looking forward to the program and hope you all really benefit from it. And we can share that for a moment. So I will introduce our speakers. Today we're going to hear from Satvik Gadamseti from Merck. Satvik is a graduate of the Rutgers University School of Engineering. He's a member of the BRC, our organization's Young Investigators Group, and is part of Merck's Emerging Talent Rotational program. He's currently in the Merck Manufacturing Division and is applying analytics to solve challenges in the manufacturing and supply chain space. Previously, he worked in the Merck research labs where he contributed to a variety of projects ranging from imaging biomarkers to health economic statistics and modeling of vaccine outcomes. Eddie Ryan is a mechanical engineer with 14 years experience in design, production, and project management within pharmaceutical manufacturing. In addition, throughout his extensive experience in regulated IT development for life sciences, he has managed multidisciplinary pharmaceutical projects on behalf of many blue-chip companies. I'm just going to add a couple of points. One is that I always get asked if the slides are going to be available later, and yes, they are. We'll send a note with the recording and the links for the slides. And after our presentations, we'll have an extensive time for Q&A. There's a question box on your dashboard, and at any time you can put a note there. I'll be monitoring. If it's something that needs immediate response, I'll help you out, and otherwise we'll pull all the questions together at the end. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over to Satvik Gadamseti.
Okay, so I hope everyone can see my screen. All right, so thank you, Joanne, for the introduction. Like she mentioned, my name is Satvik Gadamseti, and I'm part of Merck. And today I'll be speaking to you about how data can improve manufacturing, and specifically I'll provide a case study and also some benefits and impact from this case study. So before we get started as to how data will be shown in manufacturing, and actually can be used in manufacturing, I'd like to provide a small primer. What is big data, or what is data science? These are some questions that I'm sure most of you have already heard, given the abundance of coverage that these topics are receiving. But just to sort of narrow the scope and provide a greater perspective on how this can be applied more suitably to manufacturing, big data can be described as um, a sort of an entity where every digital process or social media exchange produces it, every system, sensor, and mobile device transmits it, and a great characteristic of a big data is that it's arriving from multiple sources with great velocity, volume, and variety. And another sort of qualifier that people also use is veracity, the truthfulness of the data. Now, data science, on the other hand, is the skill or the statistical or mathematical knowledge that's required to harness the power of big data. It is to, as listed here, it is to use statistical methods to unravel insights in data. And ultimately, the intent is to use this knowledge to create business models and ultimately uncover new opportunities. So, given these sort of definitions and looking at industry trends, big data is really changing the way organizations work together. And data in general is actually creating a culture where IT and business leaders must really join forces to realize value from all of data. Data again is also emerging as the world's newest resource for competitive advantage. Some industries even refer to data as the new oil, so much so that it carries great potential when handled correctly, and can translate this into business processes and inform the decision-making process. Data is incredibly transformative by providing, like I said, insight into making decisions, but it also, in a more philosophical sense, it translates or it moves the decision-making process from the elite few to the empowered many. Given that the many are able to tap into these data sources and analyze them correctly, it sort of flattens the field, so it sort of flattens the world in a way. And finally, data is really changing our ability to innovate. As data grows, its value grows, and new systems need to be developed to keep pace with it. So this is just a small primer as to what data is and what data science is. Now, if we can narrow the scope, I'll speak in greater detail about data in manufacturing. So as any sort of pharmaceutical industry or biotechnology industry or an organization that manufactures a good or a widget, really, the objective is to improve product quality and yield while reducing waste and variability. So in the past 20 years or so, manufacturers have been able to reduce waste and improve productivity by using lean and Six Sigma methods. This, in certain processing environments, such as pharma, chemical, mining, petroleum, for instance, variability is actually a fact of life, sometimes even after the lean methods have been applied. So manufacturers really need to use a more granular method to diagnose and correct process flaws. So this, it sort of translates us, and now in present state, in the sort of the 21st century, data and analytics are really the solution in order to realize our objective or to find a solution for our objective. So data and advanced analytics, like I mentioned before, are really the applications of statistics and business data in order to assess and improve practices. And specifically in manufacturing, one can look at historical process data, data that's sort of conducted and collected during a particular process run for a product to uncover patterns, relationships among all the discrete process steps and inputs. And finally, by doing so, one could optimize the factors to understand the effect on the variable or state of interest. So in a nutshell, manufacturers are now taking previously isolated data sets, data that's really in silos and examined by teams in silos, are taking these isolated data sets, aggregating them, meaning linking them by a common metadata or metadata standard, and analyzing them to reveal important insights. And in doing so, these insights will the questions that are posed by the objective. So as a brief example of some of the data that one could use in a large biomanufacturing industry, here's a small example. Actually, one could look at process control, raw materials, process deviation, formulation and filling, assay information, benchmarking, and several intelligence systems. And the bullets, or sort of the boxes that are highlighted in blue, are data sources that firmly fall into the category of big data. These are data sources that can also be described as online parameters, whereby if one could take a particular factory, in that factory there's a shop floor. On that shop floor is a tank, and in this tank some product is being either mixed or created, or some chemical reaction is is undergoing. And so all of these online parameters are essentially sensors that hook into a tank and collect data by the second, some by the minute, or some even by the millisecond. And so you could anticipate that there's going to be a great volume of data that's flowing into your archives and your servers. And so you need to find a way to efficiently save and store the data, and also ensure that you don't lose any of the data in any compression or compression methods. So these four sort of blurbs or boxes fall into this big data category. Following these, you can also have facility maintenance or change control systems, chemistry and experimental models. I mean, I think these models are especially important because these are the tests that are conducted in the pilot scale before the product is moved into a scale up. And so these can inform the way that the data this data standard is developed, the data is organized, and how the data is even stored. So it's incredibly important as well. And so one could see that there are numerous data sources, and an important thing to recognize is using the data and getting the data are two entirely difficult and separate endeavors. Getting the data is difficult in the sense that one has to recognize which data source to tap into for the problem, ensure that the infrastructure that hosts the data can be used, and then get the data and put it in a sort of a state or a condition where we can actually readily apply our statistics. And even before that, we have to clean the data to ensure that this is the data that we're actually going to use. So, this is just a subset of some of the data sources that one could look into for analysis. And so I'll now jump into a case study, which is vaccine yield optimization. This was a project that was undertaken at Merck in I think, quarter 4 of 2013 and early years of 2014. And this is, like I said, has to do very much so with vaccine yield optimization, a very important problem that many pharmaceutical companies face. So vaccines often contain attenuated viruses, so they have to be handled under precise conditions during every step of the manufacturing process. So any deviation from the approved process means that these materials have to be discarded, which, if discarded in the final stages of manufacturing, can actually account to hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue. And so, really the problem statement here is we were experiencing higher than usual discard rates of vaccines due to low vaccine yields, meaning every time a set of raw materials entered the process line and the raw materials were converted into the final product, the robustness of the final product could not meet the specifications that were set when the product was approved by the regulatory authority. So this was really the problem statement. And so the solution that was proposed was to examine several data sets and try to see if we can uncover patterns of interest. And in doing so, interrogate these patterns of interest and the hypotheses that we've developed, and take them back to our process team, our engineering team, to say, hey, this is what we developed. These are the data that we looked at. Can you see and tell us if our hypotheses are substantial? And if so, we can provide some recommendations based on our findings. So the solution from a technical perspective, it was an incredibly intimidating task. Using data from different sources like the ones I mentioned in the previous slide, and staging the data was incredibly difficult. So initially, we used a sort of a massively scalable distributed relational database, our traditional SQL database. But then we realized that using a cloud-based Hadoop computing environment to not only speed up the data ingestion, but also allowing more downstream processes, which could definitely be done faster, was beneficial for us. Because first of all, you're removing this kind of rigid extract, transform, load practice of converting all of the data into a traditional database schema. And in doing so, you're making things very easy in the sense that you are taking things as they come, and you're finding insight by aggregating data sets in a very dynamic manner. You're not sort of constraining them to a certain sort of table, row, column schema. So when we ingested the data for I think about 30 to 40 batches, about 6 to 7 years worth of data. The team took the data from all the different sources, aggregated them, aligned them to get a standardized model. And the next thing we did was to really use advanced analytics with R which is an open source statistical programming software, which allowed us to chart and cluster different variables of interest in terms of heat maps or in other visualization techniques, and identify patterns across batches. Ultimately, this allowed for the development of several hypotheses, which the team we interrogated using an agile methodology. And then finally, we developed several models which ultimately proved or disproved certain hypotheses that we developed. And so the small sort of chain reaction that you could see on your screen here essentially highlights all of the effort that was done over the year into a small sort of bite-sized nugget. We took the data, we transformed it, extracted it, did some exploratory data analysis, found some hypotheses, which we then went back to the process team and ensured that they were founded in science and could be validated. We validated these hypotheses, and then finally, from the ones that we felt that were tangible and could be effectively translated back into the process sort of area, we provided the recommendations. And so all in all, the entire endeavor took about 15 billion calculations and approximately 5.5 million batch-to-batch comparisons. And this scale of computational complexity was only feasible by hosting the data on, the Hadoop and Amazon Web Services cloud environment. And so for this work, in fact, the Merck team was recognized and honored as one of the Elite 100 data science projects by Information Week in the year of 2014, which was a fantastic effort, definitely well worth the hard work that was put into the project by not only the engineers but the data scientists, the project managers, as well as the project sponsors, etc. So this was really the case study that highlights how data, by bringing it together from several disparate resources, disparate sources, and putting it together in a way that allows us to conduct data analysis, could ultimately lead to some sort of an actionable intelligence that the process team can then follow up on. And just to leave you following this, I wanted to kind of expand the scope of the influence of data in manufacturing. It's definitely growing, and I wanted to speak to a couple of examples, not only in the biopharmaceutical industry, but manufacturing industry at large. So on your screen here, the first bullet is Industry 4.0, which is this German government initiative that seeks to promote automation of the manufacturing industry across the automobile sector. In this particular case, big data is being used to optimize production schedules based on supplier, customer, and resource availability. Similarly, bullet number 2 is speaking about actually relates to manufacturers actually being able to view supplier activity in real time and allowing their teams to allocate resources as needed for time-sensitive orders. I think this is a very profound concept for any manufacturing industry, because it allows one to accurately predict, or at least accurately anticipate, the demand so that one could meet and scale up their resources to provide the supply. And then finally, something I wanted to speak to you about is sort of compliance of machinery. Sensors on all machinery allows operation managers to understand the quality, performance, and training needs of the entire floor. And so trying to get this data and understand this data is invaluable in streamlining workflows and reducing waste. So as sort of a finishing statement, I just want to say that looking ahead, data has only emerged, but advanced analytics and the mathematical rigor with which one could treat data has been grounded in years of mathematical research and application. So successful integration of the two will be essential to set oneself apart from competitors in order to sort of derive business value and inform your decision making. With that, I just wanted to point out my references, and thank you for your attention.
Joanne, you're muted if you're talking.
I'm not talking, John. You could go ahead and put up Eddie's slides. We'll go straight along to him. This is Eddie Ryan from Neat Software.
Okay, thank you, Joanne, for the introduction. Thank you, Satwik, for your lovely presentation there. 15 billion calculations, wow, that's amazing. So it was a really great project. So today I would like to talk to you about my experience in industry and where we see data being used and the conversations that I'm having with my customers over the last 8 years since I became deeply involved in developing IT software for the regulated pharmaceutical industry. So I've spent many years working in the industry prior to that, and 9 years ago I started out, I founded Neat Software with some colleagues and to solve data problems that we saw in the industry when we worked there. So I'm going to flick through just the agenda now and show you what I'm going to deal with. I'd like to just initially start off with a case study of how our software was able to enable a pharmaceutical company to help it with its compliance effort. Then I'd like to look across the value chain just to see where data is impacting the different phases of our value chain. I'd like to look then at the discussions that we are having with our customers. And they center around decisions for quality and compliance, decisions for productivity. And then I'd like to briefly finish up and just a few pointers on, if you're looking to purchase a data management system, what some good practices you should look out for. So my case study deals with some observations that this company was receiving, and there were repeated observations over time from the FDA, and they centered around some parts of these letters centered around the validation status of their systems that they were using for manufacturing their regulated products. So one of the things was that there was findings that not in all cases, but in certain instances, some of their systems were not in a validated state, and they weren't on a periodic review process whereby they came up for revalidation or review on a periodic basis. So senior management were very eager to find a solution for this. They wanted a solution that could help them to become better at doing their validation activities and their compliance activities, and also to be able to see that information in real time, to be able to know that their systems were in a state of validation. So if they were ever to have an audit, that they knew very quickly that their systems were in a state of validation and they were in a state of control. And that information, they didn't want that information from Excel spreadsheets and stuff like that. They wanted that information to come from a database system in real time that gave them clarity. So we worked with them at that time, and we looked at putting better reporting around our system as it was, and we came up with solutions on the reporting space. I'm just going to give you an example of a report that they were able to get at the press of a button at the end of this project. So this report was able to tell them the validation status and the periodic review status of any asset on their whole site with the press of a button. And elevating that up further, they could browse to another site in the same UI and get a status update on all assets across all their facilities worldwide. So you can see there that this shows them the number of systems that are validated, the number of systems that are in progress from a review perspective, and the number of systems that are overdue. And they could drill down deeper into these systems and see exactly who's responsible for them, what documentation is being created, what's the status of that documentation, etc. So it gave them very, very macro, right down into micro level, instant information on their systems. And that was really, really appreciated on that particular project. So if I look across the value chain now, and I look from marketing all the way through to delivery and continuous monitoring, I look up the early stages, which I'm not an expert on, the whole area of marketing and the R&D. I mean, the decision making up here is huge. You know, companies have to identify a niche in the marketplace for a new product. They have to analyze a lot of marketing information and sales information. They have to know, you know, where do they want to target their expertise and their capabilities, in what therapeutic area, and even if what company they might want to acquire. And then they have to take that information and research and develop a new drug. And that's huge, and there's a huge amount of data involved in that, all from the safety aspect right through to the quality and the efficacy. And there's a huge amount of information gathered there, And if that's structured and done well, that information is invaluable to the rest of the value chain, because it dictates what happens everywhere else. You know, from process design, tech transfer through to manufacturing and delivery to the customer, the patient. We've done this. I mean, our industry is really good at this because we've done this over and over again. But the earlier stages where there's a huge amount of data need, I really appreciate that area very much. However, I work in the manufacturing area, so I'm going to spend the rest of my presentation speaking about my experience in that area and the discussions I have with my customers around decisions they want to make. So I guess I wanted to touch on quality performance metrics. You know, there's a shift from a compliance culture towards a quality performance culture, and this is initiated by the FDA, and it comes on top of quality by design and PAT and all of that type of good stuff, and it's a continuation of that in my view. And it's about the goal is to reliably produce high quality products without extensive regulatory oversight. We're all stretched on the resource front, including the regulators. We all have to do more with less. That's the mantra in the industry, in most industries right now. The benefits of this objective quality performance metrics approach is quicker speed to market, reduced costs, less defective batches, more reliable supply, and frequency of FDA visits reduced. Of course, this quality performance metrics is, companies have been doing a lot of this for a long time, quality by design included, but now I think as an industry we're becoming more structured and getting more consistent at this. The Performance Metrics Initiative has just begun. We'll see a lot on this over the next year or two, and it's about being able to measure ourselves and be able to share that information with the auditors, with the regulators, to ensure we make quality products and protect our patients. And that is the key to that, is that metrics that we can, that high level metrics that are fed from lower level information and data, so that we can get a good understanding of how we're doing. So I would recommend you take a look at the International Society of Pharmaceutical Engineers, their website. They've started this pilot program around quality metrics, and with the FDA included and a number of other pharmaceutical companies, involved in this process. And at this stage, it's just begun, really. And at this stage, they have drafted up the metrics that they feel are the right ones to monitor. And there's a number of them there. You can see from lot acceptance rate down to complaints rate, confirmed out of specification rate, US recall events, stability failure rates, etc. So there's a bunch of them, and the objective is that the community, the manufacturers and the FDA and the ISP, supported by the ISP and coordinated, will go on this program over the next year or so and identify from this pilot program if we are heading in the right direction and have we got the right metrics. So it's one to watch out closely, because I think a lot of great information is going to come from this. So now I'm going to move on and talk about our discussions with our customers over the last 8 years that I've been in the IT industry, selling a regulated IT product to the industry. And some of the big questions in the manufacturing side: are we compliant? You know, are all my assets validated? Are my deviations closed? CAPAs closed? Are we audit ready? You know, how much work do we have to do to get audit ready? I mean, across the whole manufacturing space. Where are the bottlenecks? Where do we focus our efforts? Are our systems capable of manufacturing other products? Are we capable of being multi-purpose? You know, what do we need to do to make us multi-purpose ready almost? Give us more of a flexible manufacturing capability. Decisions around productivity. How much time are we spending on various documentation activities? Everything from, you know, in the past we may not have seen this, but in industries has got to be productive now as well, and there's a lot of focus on, you know, the documentation, the protocols, the deviations, CAPAs. How much time are we spending on them? You know, creating them, reviewing, improving, etc. Categorize deviations, CAPAs, change controls. Are we categorizing them right? Are we able to trend them and see Are we having issues in certain areas of our systems and our processes? Real-time progress on project status. Can we see in real time how things are going? Or are we losing time and losing the opportunity to get our products to market in a fast period? Where are our bottlenecks again? So we looked at, again, we've extended on what we did for this customer many years ago, and now we're looking forward and how we do this. So we built a very extensive reporting capability over our product, which is a productivity tool. So we allow companies to look at the document status of across any site. So you can drill into any site in your organization, and in real time you can see the document status of any document that's been created in the application. So the application allows the user to do the work in compliance in real time as they do their work, and that data is captured and reports up to a high level, and it can be viewed at macro or micro level by the people who need that information in real time across the organization. Again, you're looking at metrics for document lifecycle. You have to drill down and view full metrics of a single document on any site if you want to. Again, validation project progress by system. Drill down and view the status of all the project deliverables associated with any project. You can see what status they're at, etc. Quality and compliance decisions. So we have real-time questions we're hearing here are real-time validation status. We spoke a bit about that earlier on in our case study. Are we in a state of compliance? Where do we focus our validation effort? What validation criteria was used to actually validate a system? Is it within our design space? If we change our process, if we change our process parameters, are we still validated? We need to know that information quickly instead of having to drill into our vaults to find a documentation to prove that. We need to see that information, we need to trust that information, and we need to have that at our fingertips. So if we're creating a new process or creating a new modified process, is the systems we have, are they validated or do we have to revalidate them, etc.? So we need to know the parameters that they're validated for as well. So, so that's the other things we see in quality and compliance decisions are periodic review status for validated assets, what systems are due for periodic review, visibility into all aspects of the review, number of deviations, change controls, etc. performed on a system. Again, back to that question, are we audit ready? I mean, it's a big thing. Are our records complete and available in real time? Is the data that we're looking at, is that real-time data? It's great having a database system bringing data up to a macro level, but can we trust that data? That's a key thing, and that's all part of specifying your system right and validating that system. So here's a view of a periodic review details. In this, you can see, in this report here, you can see that you can drill into any system in any site across your organization. You can mine the data from an actual review document. You can see what's happening in that, how many change controls are being reviewed as part of that review, how many deviations. You can trend all those things and you can see, hey, these systems are seeing many more issues repeatedly, and there must be something not perfect about this. We must look into this in more detail and we must do some work on this or whatever. So then I want to, just a little bit about a modern data management system. I mean, they're structured, productivity tools. They're powerful data source for decision making. Capture data at source in a structured manner, presented in a structured manner, depending on how you design it. Everyone can participate from any place in the process, can view the data. All the data can be mined and made relevant. Easily scaled across the organization. These are the benefits of modern data management systems. And modern data management systems and the technology that's out there is really great now. And it can achieve all of these things. Of course, you have to know what you want from them before you go down the road of any data management system. So when you're looking to secure one, I would say some points to remember would be that to be modern and to be able to give you all these capabilities, it's a server-side software. It should be browser-based, thin client application, so you don't have to manage software on your machine. It's scalable across your organization, and it's mobile. So developed for the internet is another big thing. If it's a GXP system, then regulatory compliance is designed into the architecture of the system. Sometimes you get systems, legacy systems, where bolt-ons are put on. If it's a regulated system, it really should be thinking about, electronic records and signatures. You should be working with those. The application should have that built-in, ingrained in its architecture, in its DNA. Robust reporting capability, that's key. You know, sometimes people buy, you know, look at buying applications and they're focused on the business process, and that is important. That's what you're starting out with. But you do have to focus on what's the report you want out of it. Knowing the data that you need is a key requirement, and how you want that data presented, so you can make intelligent decisions based on that data. I'd like to say thank you very much for your time. I'd like to pass you back to Joanne.
Well, thank you both. That was really very helpful. I would say that I have a couple of questions, and we have some great questions from our audience as well. Would you talk a little more? I'm going to ask Satvik and then also Eddie, but I'll let you go first, Satvik, about where the data comes from. Is this all coming in from sensors? Is there manual input involved? And how is it captured to bring it into the system?
Sure. I think so. So the entire data landscape, I would split it up into two fields. One would be online online data, which would be, like the gentleman or the woman who posed the question, is coming from sensors, etc. But then, like they also said, there's a lot of manual data that's required. So, for instance, if I could draw from my personal experience, there's an infrastructure widely used across a lot of industry called Pi, which is a solution that's offered by OSI Soft, and this really embeds into all of the tanks, the sparges, the chromatography columns, and the filtration devices, etc., and collects these metrics, these oxygen coefficient levels, pressure levels, temperature levels, etc., in a very sort of a passive manner. It just sort of takes them, does some sort of a compression, stores them on the archives. And so these archives are typically some sort of a SQL database, but are actually now moving towards a more sort of a cloud-based archive where the rigid infrastructure, the rigid schema is no longer required. But that's an evolving pattern. But the online metrics are definitely there. Most batches also have these things called batch records, which are essentially physical pieces of paper where the technician enters, certain times when the batch has started, when the batch has ended, if there's any technician intervention that was needed along the way, things of that nature. And so, one of the great challenges is pulling all of the data together. And in the case of any data that's manually written, you need to transcribe it into an electronic format. And for that, there are several software that are available, such as OCR, or one could even spend time to actually go through each of the documents and transcribe them manually by hand, depending on the data set size you're looking at. So these are two sort of variations of the data that you could look at, and really the most people say it's data science, but the art of the data science, the artistic piece of the entire endeavor, comes in when you need to find a way to link two data sets, which one would think are not connected, but then there's always a link that you can put them together, either by sort of the timestamps or the batch IDs or the tag IDs. One way or another, you have to find a way of putting them together, because only then will you get the sort of the holistic picture of the entire data landscape, and in there you can identify your patterns, which would ultimately be most helpful to you.
Great. Eddie, do you want to add to that?
Well, what I can say there, Joanne, is that in our world, which is more in the data management system world, we are a productivity tool, or we live in that world, and productivity tool helps people to capture the data as they do their work. So, but we do take information in and data in from other data management systems and that type of thing that's needed in the process. So ours is a sort of a business process management tool that catches the data as people do their work, helps them to do their work in real time and more efficiently. But that data then is used and in a structured manner. So it's unlike the big data scenario where you're bringing in data from many sensors, like Satvik is saying, and putting structure on the data afterwards. Ours is brought in a structured way. So yeah, so I mean that's really about all I can add to that one.
Okay, great. Well, we have a two-part question here. Thank you, Mehul. Let's see, this is directed to Satvik. Can you shed some light on the use case specific R algorithms used, and whether there are any recommendations, whether any recommendations have been implemented that are preemptive based on them, example, the sensor data from the tanks?
Okay, so I guess the first question to reiterate is, are there any concrete examples that use R or sort of
Mm-hmm.
packages that one could use to?
Could you
Okay,
shed
so
some light on
so
the use case? Yes, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
okay, so shed some light on the use case. Certainly, yes. So depending on the sort of the problem statement or the um, yeah, what the question that one is trying to answer. You can R is phenomenal in the sense that it's an open source environment, and a lot of people contribute to it regularly, and then typically the contributions are made in the form of packages, and these packages can range anywhere from sort of basic statistical programming all the way to advanced data mining topics, which is really what's most important to us in the manufacturing field. So some key use cases could involve the use of random forest. So random forest is a sort of ensemble learning method that allows us to pick what are the best descriptors or best variables that help describe the overall phenomena that we're observing. So for instance, in our particular case, we did in fact use random forest to sort of whittle down from the original 100 or so variables that were of interest and break them down into 10, maybe 12 of those, which we can then, investigate further in the experimentation, sort of in experimentation or with the use of experiments. Um, really, one thing that's really important to understand is data mining cannot establish a cause and effect relationship, or rather, the use of data cannot establish a cause and effect relationship that is observed in the real world. It can only give you a recommendation that you can then go back and validate experimentally, through the use of controlled variable experiments. And so, going back to the random forest experiment, we had this our prospective field of 100 variables. We break them down and we identify them and we say, hey, can we weight this one and we'll see what the end result is. It's not favorable, then let's weight it less and we'll see what happens. And so from 100, we can break it down to a subset of 12 or so, and then those 12 or so variables then can go off to the experimentation, which they can validate. So that's sort of a use case where advanced statistical mining tools, like the random forest package in R could be helpful. In some cases, for instance, you wouldn't even have to do any multivariate analysis. One could simply look at exploratory ways of just visualizing the data. And visualizing the data is absolutely fantastic because if one is looking at um, process data like temperature or pressure, if there's a sudden dip in pressure across all tanks at a particular time interval, that could serve as an anomaly, which could then offset any process that's running in a tank. So it really depends on the problem that one is trying to answer. And again, this is kind of the artistic value of data science. You really have to have an intuition for finding the right solution. And I'm sorry if you could repeat the second question.
I'll be happy to. Let's see. Are there any recommendations that have been implemented that are preemptive based on that have been implemented that are preemptive based on the example of the sensor data from the tanks, for example, or from the sensor data from the tanks? Thank you, Mehul.
Sure. So, on the manufacturing shop floor, there are a great deal of reporting services that are available, where Pi actually offers them natively with their software package. The sensors collect the data, they compress them, and then the reporting service can actually tap into a particular subset or event frame of the data and say, hey, look, this is what the trend looks like from time equal to 0, from to time equal to 240 minutes. And when that's done, people can say, okay, within the last 4 hours, this is how the temperature looked. Let's compare this back to the previous batches which we ran, and those batches ran successfully, i.e., the results passed specification. And so if the trends look uniform across history, then you could say then this batch will likely work in a favorable manner. So those are some ways that one could preemptively do it. But now, really, in terms of integrating all the data sources, it's actually a pretty difficult question to ask because you are now moving away from a diagnostic a framework to one that it anticipates a problem before it even occurs. So for that, I honestly I'm not sure, but that's a question that I've wondered about before, and I'm actually currently researching to see if we can integrate some sort of that kind of intelligence almost into our data systems.
I think we're going to have to ask you back to talk about that when you're ready. That sounds great.
Okay.
I'd like to ask Eddie, when we spoke earlier, we talked a bit about the whole value chain that goes into the manufacturing process. And I would like to ask you to talk a bit about, there's shifting and changing parameters that need to be collected and addressed throughout the process. And can you talk about some that are, what you've seen happening in the last few years and what you anticipate coming in terms of the collection of all this information and the use of it?
Yeah, sure, Joanne. That's a good question, and I guess I kind of refer back to the R&D side where the data is, initially the raw data is achieved, and where you design your process and you understand your product and your critical quality attributes associated with your product and your materials required in the process. You design your process. You have to manage your parameters within your process. And I guess there's quality by design, and I'm sure a lot of the audience will understand, is all about understanding your product and your process and your parameters that are needed to be managed. And if these parameters are moving, how far can they move before you get into a situation where you are probably outside of the design, the process design that you lodged with your marketing authorization form application. So I guess the key would be to be monitoring these parameters, and Satvik spoke about that a little bit there as well, and to ensure that you're staying within your design space for those parameters. And if you do that, there's tolerance within, you can change and you can make changes. If you keep your parameters within the design stage, design phase, then you may not have to go back for change control to the regulators. So yes, monitoring your parameters and making sure they're staying within their design space is really feeds into the whole area of continuous reliability and continuous improvement.
Terrific. We have another question here from Tom Fair, who is our Director for Strategic Alliances here at the Biopharma Research Council. And he asks, does the FDA have guidance about validating electronic tools for optimizing manufacturing, or is this outside of the FDA's scope?
Yes, from my yes, I mean, if you're using a tool that supports GMP, which is the rules governing all manufacturing, you have to be validated, and there is guidance. I mean, I think the best guidance I think out there right now for validating regulated software systems is that which is put out there by the International Society for Pharmaceutical Engineers, GAMP5, Good Automation Manufacturing Practice. And it's all about the risk of your system and how much validation you should do based on the risk of that system to your patient and to your quality. And if the risk is high, then you have to do more validation than if the risk is low. And that system allows you to categorize your software system that you are buying. And based on the category, you will do different levels of validation. So it's pretty extensive in its guidelines regarding that. Then there is, if you're managing electronic records, you need to be very cognizant of FDA Regulation 21 CF Part 11, because that governs, regulations around electronic records and electronic signatures in your application.
Great. I'd just like to check with each of you. Is there a question you'd like to ask one of the other?
Oh, as of right now, I don't. I typically take time to sleep on things, and so when I do, I'll be happy to. I'll be certain to reach out to Eddie.
We can reconvene on that. How about you, Eddie?
Yes.
Anything that occurs to you that you'd like to address?
Nothing off the top of my head. I've been preoccupied with my own presentation, but I must say I really enjoyed Satvik's presentation. I mean, it was giving me a great insight, and I can appreciate it a bit more. And when I keep talking about that R&D space, I keep thinking about the big data scenario,
Mm-hmm. Great. We have another question about the link to the 100 I don't have the whole note here, but the best 100, one of the best 100 examples in information science, and we will include the link directly to that study and to the article about it anyway on our website, and we'll be sending a note out to everyone when the recording is up and the slides are available, and we'll include that link at the same time. Satvik, did that project happen on your watch, or was that before you arrived at Merck?
So that project happened when I was at Merck. I was actually still part of my first rotation. However, I helped with the sort of the tying down of that project. But actually, to inform you guys, we've initiated another big data project with a similar scope and a similar problem statement. And so I hope to emulate the work that was done by my predecessors and maybe even surpass them. So yeah.
That's fantastic. So we just have a few more minutes, and I just think it's interesting, Satvik, this program that you're in, which seems to put you into different environments. And I think this is an audience of people who care about manufacturing. So can you talk a little bit about the different aspects that you've been able to get involved with during this program?
Certainly. So just to reiterate, I'm part of this program within the IT organization at Merck called the Emerging Talent Rotational Program, where the program takes emerging talent and rotates them across the organization. And so as part of my first rotation, I was in the Merck Research Labs where, as Joanne kindly put it during my introduction, I worked with a bright and an incredibly ambitious group of scientists working across a range of business problems. And so I felt that I learned a lot, and one of my objectives when I was entering the program was to learn as much about the organization as quickly as possible. And so, I certainly did not feel that I learned everything to know about the research labs, but I felt that it was a good time that I step outside and learn more about the manufacturing division. And so as part of this second transition, or rather transition into this second role, I learned about vaccines manufacturing in a, obviously which is in a very controlled and regulatory environment. I also learned about manufacturing in the small molecule space, and also sort of issues not exactly related to manufacturing, but problems that arise before a product is manufactured and after. For instance, the sort of retrieval and storing of raw materials, and also some supply chain issues. So this program allows you to work with people across the entire chain of the sort of this pharmaceutical pipeline, and in doing so, it gives you a great deal of knowledge and of course, support from the people you work with to sort of learn and contribute in a meaningful way.
That's terrific. I think we've done a beautiful job today. Is there anything that either of you would like to say as we're closing?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. Certainly, the ability to share with sort of people across the scientific disciplines is something really exciting for me, and I just hope to, sort of take part in these kind of webinars in the future, not only as a presenter, but definitely as an audience. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Eddie. I really appreciate your commitment and your contribution. Is there anything you would like to add before we say goodbye to everyone?
I'd like to say thank you to the audience, and I would like to say thank you to BRC for inviting me to speak, and I'm glad, I hope I was able to add some value to the lives of the people out there who are managing data, and if I can be of any help to anybody, please feel free to get in touch with me, and I'd look forward to sharing something again in the future. Thank you very much, Joanne.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone, and you'll be hearing from us about upcoming programs. I will just finally say that all of our great ideas come from our audiences. I very often get a note after a program like this saying, well, here's another aspect that either I'd like to learn about or I'd like to present about. If you go to our website, it's very easy to find out how to get in touch with me, and I truly invite you to let me know your thoughts and if there's anything you'd like to see or you'd like to share. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon.